It's double standards, and double standards, like the expendability of some people and the acceptability of other people, that's the vocabulary, that's the language of power. It's not the language of us. And when I say we and us, I don't mean, as you hear journalists saying so often, when they mean we, they talk about the government. Well, do you think we should be doing this? They say minister, you know. Well, we and us are people. In the United States, the administration is one of the most unpopular in history, but you actually wouldn't know that. So the we, when they speak about power over there, is the power of people. Yeah.
I mean, you saw the results when you tried to report the Middle East conflict truthfully. If we look all the way back to 1970 and your first television documentary, The Quiet Mutiny for World in Action, you caused a furore at the ITA, which then regulated commercial television. It was a film about disintegration of morale among American troops in Vietnam, and the American ambassador to Britain then complained to the ITA about it. I remember the late Jeremy Wallington, who was editor of World in Action, telling me how he and the Grenada joint chairman, Dennis Foreman, were hauled down from Manchester to the ITA in London and got a rollicking from the chairman, Sir Robert Fraser. They stood their ground and they defended the film very admirably, but as Jeremy Wallington said, they felt they had lost brownie points with the ITA. You were switching from newspapers to television at that time. Was that a shock?
Well, it was a bit of a shock. I mean, I was already a newspaper journalist, and you know, I knew nothing about ITAs and IBAs and so on. I admired World in Action. This was a film for World in Action, and it was a story I'd been working on for quite a long time, and it was about American soldiers, conscripted soldiers, shooting their own officers. I mean, it was the mutiny of a huge army in Vietnam. It was the arrival of the conscripted army and the effect on the war. And I believe that's really got, that and the efforts of the Vietnamese, but that really got America out of Vietnam. But it was just, you couldn't, it was a truth. You know, it was all verified. The witnesses were there, the facts were there, but you just couldn't say it. Yeah. It seems extraordinary now. And the IBA, or as the ITA, as it then was called, was a very political organization. And we became the IBA for many, many years. Before any of my documentaries went to air, I had to submit my scripts, in fact the whole film, to effectively somebody who's an official censor. And they would tell me what I could say or couldn't say. And I had the opportunity sometimes to argue it, but often not. So, but this was so outrageous that we should dare to say that the American army was really falling apart in Vietnam. That Sir Robert Fraser, who was one of those knighted Australians that came here before I did, and joined the upper reaches of the establishment, was given some various numbers of quangos, and he finally got this one, said, called me everything under the sun, you know, as a sort of danger, revolutionary, Maoist, Marxist, all those things. But of course, he couldn't say that publicly, but it came back to the company, and Granada Television, which had produced this film, was then led by Lord Bernstein, who was one of an old guard of great liberal, libertarian broadcasters, who was outraged that this should happen and defended the film publicly. And that was the end of it, and it taught me a lesson. It meant that if you stood up to these people, no matter who they were, you might just get your work through. And that's happened on one or two occasions.
Well, we've been talking about taboos, and another one you touch on in the book came when you returned to South Africa in 1997 in the wake of democracy, and 30 years after you'd been banned from the country by the apartheid regime. The truth you dared to say that black South Africans were as poor under Nelson Mandela as they were before caused what you describe in the book as spirited debate. I think actually it caused ructions, didn't it? The South African Broadcasting Corporation initially refused to screen it. Then they said they would do so only if they ran a disclaimer before it started. And then there was the veteran South African journalist Alistair Sparks, who wrote he was offended by criticism of the ANC. But within a couple of years, there was serious debate about what had gone wrong.
And now it's as the, I have to say, as the theme of the Quiet Mutiny, the theme of apartheid did not die, as is sort of is accepted. It's received wisdom in South Africa. There are big troubles in South Africa. You don't hear about them very much because that extraordinary period